My sister kicked me out of her wedding, accusing me of stealing her fiancé, but now he's decided not to marry her because of me. Michelle had always felt like an outsider in her own family. Growing up, it was clear that Emily, her older sister, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, who seemed to get everything right. Michelle, on the other hand, felt invisible. She was different in ways that her family never seemed to understand. Her interests were unique, and she felt disconnected from their world. While Emily bonded effortlessly with their parents over shared interests and accomplishments, Michelle felt as though she was speaking a foreign language when she tried to engage. Over time, the isolation grew. The absence of warmth and understanding left a lasting mark, and Michelle began to distance herself, preferring the company of her grandparents over the tension-filled walls of her childhood home. It wasn't just that her family didn't understand her, it was that they didn't seem to care. Michelle would reach out, attempting to create some semblance of connection, but it always felt like a futile effort. Her parents rarely acknowledged her struggles, and even Emily, her own sister, who should have been her ally, was too wrapped up in her own world to notice the growing emotional rift. The silence was deafening. Michelle came to the painful realization that her presence was hardly felt in the family. It was as though they were more content with her absence. Her parents never called, never checked in, and Michelle began to feel like a stranger in her own home. The loneliness became a constant companion, and with every passing day, her belief that she didn't belong only grew stronger. As Michelle grew older, the gap between her and Emily only seemed to widen. It wasn't just that Emily was the golden child of the family, she was the epitome of perfection. She always excelled in everything, and her accomplishments were constantly praised by their parents. Michelle couldn't help but feel the weight of comparison, as if every small mistake she made was magnified in the shadow of Emily's flawless image. Their relationship, or what little of it there was never built on the bond many siblings shared. Instead, it was tinged with an underlying rivalry, one that Michelle never fully understood. She watched, helplessly, as Emily's life unfolded like a storybook, always the one receiving attention, admiration, and love from their parents, while Michelle remained in the background, overlooked. Michelle tried to reach out, to bridge the divide between them, but every effort felt like a failure. Emily was too absorbed in her perfect world to notice or care. Whenever Michelle tried to voice her feelings, Emily would brush her off with a laugh or a dismissive comment. It hurt, more than words could express. The more Michelle tried, the more she realized how distant they were from each other. There was no warmth between them, no sisterhood, just a quiet, painful realization that Emily would never see her as an equal, only as a shadow in her life. The contrast was unbearable. Michelle longed for connection, for understanding, but it seemed like her sister, her own flesh and blood, would never give her the chance to be seen for who she truly was. That hurt more than anything. The silence between them became deafening, and in the end, Michelle gave up trying to be part of her sister's world. She wasn't invited to it, not really. And deep down, she knew she never would be. When Jonathan entered their lives, Michelle had no idea how much everything would change. At first, he seemed like just another addition to the family, Emily's boyfriend, polite, kind, and easy to talk to. But for Michelle, Jonathan was something different. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly saw her. He treated her with respect and warmth, something she hadn't experienced from her family in what felt like forever. It was subtle at first, just friendly conversations over dinner, the occasional laugh, and shared stories about school, work, and life. For a brief moment, Michelle felt as if she belonged. But that fleeting sense of comfort was shattered when Emily started to act strange. It began with cold stares during family gatherings, followed by a sharp, accusatory comment here and there. Jonathan, who had always been a kind presence, suddenly seemed to attract Emily's possessive attention. She watched him closely, her eyes filled with a jealousy Michelle couldn't comprehend. Michelle tried to ignore it, chalking it up to Emily's insecurities, but it didn't stop. One evening, after a seemingly harmless conversation with Jonathan, Emily cornered Michelle, her voice sharp with venom. "I know what you're doing," she hissed, pulling her aside. "You're trying to take him from me, just like you always do." Michelle stood there in stunned silence, unable to grasp what was happening. The accusation was so absurd, so out of the blue, that for a moment, it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. How had it come to this? The betrayal wasn't just from her sister, it was from someone she thought she could trust. Someone who had made her feel seen, only to be caught in the web of jealousy. Jonathan's kindness had turned into the spark that ignited a fire between the two sisters, and Michelle wasn't sure if anything could put it out. The tension between Michelle and Emily reached a boiling point after that night. What had started as a whisper of doubt in Emily's mind had grown into an all-consuming fire. Emily's jealousy festered, turning into something darker, something irrational. It wasn't enough for her to simply accuse Michelle of trying to steal Jonathano. She needed to make sure everyone saw her as the wronged party. It was as if she could no longer see the person standing before her as her sister, but as a rival to everything she held dear. The words stung. "You're trying to take him from me. You've always wanted what I have." Michelle, though stunned by the accusation, refused to let herself be dragged into the chaos. She tried to laugh it off, to reason with Emily, but it was like speaking to a wall. Emily had shut herself off from anything Michelle said. Their conversation grew heated, with Michelle insisting she was simply being kind, nothing more. But Emily didn't want to listen. Instead, she withdrew further, her coldness cutting Michelle to the bone. Things between them became unbearably tense. Emily started avoiding Michelle at every family gathering, clinging to Jonathan like a lifeline, as if his attention was a prize she couldn't bear to share. The room would feel suffocating when they were all together, the unspoken accusations hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Jonathan, for his part, remained awkwardly neutral. He acted like nothing had changed between him and Michelle, but his discomfort was palpable. Then came the bombshell. Emily told Michelle that she wasn't invited to the wedding. "Jonathan has feelings for you," Emily declared, as though that would explain everything. Michelle's heart dropped. She felt as though the world had tilted off its axis, the one event that should have brought them all together, and instead, it was tearing them apart. How had it come to this? How had a simple connection between two people been twisted into something so toxic? Michelle didn't know, but she knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. Michelle's heart pounded as Emily's words echoed in her ears. "You're not invited to the wedding." The shock hit her like a slap to the face, leaving her breathless and stunned. She had expected a lot of things in life, maybe even some tension between them. But this? This was a betrayal she couldn't have foreseen. "Jonathan has feelings for you," Emily continued, her voice dripping with a venomous certainty. The absurdity of it all seemed to suffocate Michelle. How had it come to this? How had a simple act of kindness, a shared conversation with Jonathan, turned into the catalyst for all this chaos? Michelle tried to reason with her. to ask her how she could even think such a thing. But Emily's eyes were cold, and her words were final. The walls had been built, and Michelle found herself on the other side. Her sister had made a choice, and Michelle wasn't a part of her life anymore, not even for the most important day of all. The sense of rejection was unbearable. She had always been the one who kept family together, even when they drifted apart. But now, her place in the family had been erased in an instant. She wasn't just excluded from the wedding, she was excluded from Emily's life. And that hurt more than anything. Michelle stared at the phone screen, the words, "You're not invited to the wedding," flashing before her eyes as if they were burning into her soul. She didn't know how to react. A surge of anger mixed with heartbreak boiled within her, but she was too numb to say anything. Emily had crossed a line, and Michelle knew, deep down, that things would never be the same again. The wedding, the one moment where they should have shared a bond, a family celebration, had now become a battle. What hurt most was the finality in Emily's tone. The accusation about Jonathan was ludicrous, but it wasn't just the claim that stunned, it was the rejection. "Jonathan has feelings for you." The words kept playing over and over in Michelle's mind, each repetition making her feel smaller, more isolated. She wanted to scream, to confront Emily and demand an explanation. But what would be the point? Emily had already made up her mind, and no matter how much Michelle fought to explain herself, it wouldn't change anything. That night, Michelle made a decision. She wasn't going to beg for a seat at the table where she was clearly unwanted. Instead, she booked a ticket, packed her bags, and escaped to a place where she didn't have to endure the suffocating weight of family drama. She needed peace, even if it meant walking away from everything she had ever known. Michelle wasn't going to let Emily's insecurities control her. She would find her own happiness, even if it meant leaving the family behind. And as the plane took off, she finally felt a sense of liberation, the weight lifting from her shoulders. The days following Emily's ultimatum were agonizingly quiet. Michelle had distanced herself from the wedding chaos, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut. The decision she had made to walk away from her family, to finally protect herself from their toxic grip, weighed heavily on her heart. And then, just as she was starting to settle into her new reality, the phone call came. Jonathan, of all people, was on the other end. His voice was unusually subdued, filled with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "I can't go through with this," he said, his words striking Michelle like a dagger to the chest. "I can't marry her, not after how she treated you. I've seen the way she's been, and I can't ignore it anymore. This isn't the life I want." For a moment, Michelle couldn't process what he was saying. Jonathan, her sister's fiancé, the man who had seemed so distant and removed from the family drama, was now taking a stand. He wasn't just refusing to marry Emily. He was validating Michelle's pain, acknowledging everything she had endured in silence. A wave of unexpected emotions flooded her. Relief, anger, a sense of betrayal. Was it even possible for everything to unravel this fast? Jonathan's decision wasn't just about the wedding. It was about a deeper betrayal that had been building for years, one Michelle had tried to ignore for too long. But as the call ended and the silence returned, Michelle couldn't help but feel a strange sense of vindication. For the first time, someone Jonathan, of all people, had seen through the facade of her family, and it felt like justice. Michelle stood at the edge of her new life, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of emotions that had torn through her over the past weeks. She had always imagined that family meant unconditional love, that no matter how far apart they grew, there would always be a thread holding them together. But now, looking back at the wreckage of her relationship with Emily, she realized that thread had long since frayed. The wedding had been the final straw, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, and her decision to walk away was the first real choice she'd made for herself in years. As the days passed, Michelle felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. For once, she wasn't bound by expectations or the weight of family obligations. She didn't need to fight for a place at the table anymore. She had learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was let go. There was no fixing the broken parts of her family. No apology or gesture could undo the years of neglect, rejection, and manipulation. And perhaps that was okay. Jonathan's decision to call off the wedding didn't change the past, but it gave Michelle something priceless: validation. For the first time, someone had seen the truth about her family, someone who wasn't bound by blood or tradition. She hadn't been imagining the dysfunction. The hurt it had all been real. And now, she was free. Free to build a life for herself, on her terms, without the constant shadow of her family's toxicity looming over her.